In 1994, this morning's guest came kicking to Francis Marion. Meet him, coming up next on Carolina People. Good morning. Welcome to Carolina People. This morning we're at the Haberdashery, Gentlemen's Clothiers in the Blackwater Market in historic downtown Conway. We're focused on the kickoff of the Francis Marion University Patriots athletic season, and we're visiting with its athletic director, Murray Hartzler. Good morning, Murray.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for coming in early on a Monday morning. What about the Blackwater Market?
It's gorgeous. Gorgeous
This is
place.
amazing. Yeah. Did you imagine?
No, I did not. I was really very impressed with it when I walked in.
Traveling down here early this morning and walking through, just the whole setup is stupendous.
Yes.
Right here, it's almost an entire city block. It just seems to go on and on.
Yes.
Is this your first trip down to Conway?
No, I was in Conway a few years ago. We did, with the Board of Trustees, we had a boat ride in the river, and that was very nice up the Waccamaw River and back. So that was nice. So I've been in Conway a couple times, but this is a very beautiful store.
Yeah, absolutely. How long have you been at Francis Marion, Murray?
Actually, I came in 1994 as the men's soccer coach, and then started the women's program. And then in 2001, I believe, that's when I became just the men's coach and the athletic director. And then I've just resigned as soccer coach and became the full-time athletic director this last year.
Is that right? So for the last 5 or 6 years, you've had this dual hat.
You're right.
That's a big hat.
Yeah, that was a big hat. And we had a plan in place for me to be moved out of athletic director, actually in a couple more years, moved out of, men's soccer in a couple more years.
Right.
Thankfully, we've been able to speed that process up because it was really doing a disservice to the student athletes in the soccer program or your supporters. It was hard to do both. It's just extremely difficult to do both, and some was suffering. So, very important move for the whole overall strength of the athletic department and the athletic program to make that separation. And we have a lot of faith in Coach Varnado, who we promoted from assistant to head coach, to keep the program moving in the right direction.
Right, and with 12 12 particular sports there,
correct,
the opportunity, I think 2 of them are now moving into or have just moved into Division I, and potentially more opportunities down the road. Correct.
Men's golf and women's soccer, we started the process just a little over 2.5 years ago to move them to Division I. There's a process you go through where you submit annual reports, and in fact we're waiting on we put the last report in June 30th, and we should be hearing any minute or any day. Hopefully when I get back in my office, the letter's waiting for us.
That's right. Yeah.
And there's no reason to think that our men's golf and women's soccer program won't be full Division I members. And what that means is we've been competing as Division I the last 2 years and meeting all the Division I requirements, but now with that happen, they'd qualify for NCAA playoffs if they get selected. So that's very exciting for them. Both those programs have had a lot of success, and we're continuing to move them forward. So. Do
you know about how many teams compete in NCAA or in Division I? Athletics, is it in the 160, 165,
no. Well,
it's
larger. It's different per sports. All right. So in women's soccer, there's about 280 teams.
Is that right?
In Division I. Typically basketball.
Right.
Basketball, the largest, there are about 400 teams in Division I. When you start looking at all of that. So each sport is a little bit different in terms of sponsorship. At Division, if you're a full Division I member, you have to sponsor without football at least 14 sports. Okay.
Is that right?
It's different if you have a football program than if you don't. And we don't have a football program, so if we eventually would move all our programs to Division I, we would have to add 2 more teams to make that happen. So.
Well, and if you contemplated that, actually, let's go ahead and break down for viewers just what the 6 and 6 are. You've got 6 men's and 6 women's.
Sure. We have men's and women's soccer, men's and women's basketball, baseball, softball, men's and women's tennis, men's golf, volleyball, and men's and women's cross country.
Okay, that's right at 12.
That's right.
You've gotten them to T. I hope you won't quiz me to
that's all right.
Them back to you, but that's and of course are there any that are practicing year-round, or that the students are really there on a year-round basis?
Well, no one's on campus year-round during the summer months unless they're taking some summer classes. But when you're in school, you have both when in soccer, for example, you have both a traditional season in the fall and a non-traditional season in the spring where you can do some practicing. But when you're not even in those, whenever we're in school, you're allowed 8 hours a week where a coach can work with the team members in terms of doing fitness, weightlifting, those type of things, and then 2 hours of those 8 hours can be individual skill instruction. So there's opportunities for the coach to work with the team year-round, but it's different. In season, you're allowed 20 hours a week. Out of season, you're allowed only 8 hours a week. So there's different regulations you have to follow and know throughout the year.
So you're constantly having to stay in tune with, as a coach or as athletic director, with the regulations.
Yeah, this day and age, when we had an opening staff meeting here over a week ago, and this day, and trying to bring all our coaches up to the new NCAA regs that are coming into place, new things that are that sort of thing. And it's a lot different from when I first became a head coach, back in '84. You have to be more in tune to. You had to be in tune back there to the rules and regulations, but there's more important paperwork, and the rules are diverse and they change, and a coach needs to be aware of them and what's happening. And it's really important. My role and our assistant director for compliance, the athletic director for compliance's role is to make sure the coaches are staying up to date with them and they're getting the proper paperwork turned in time, and so we don't have any eligibility issues with student athletes and nothing falls through the cracks. It's a good process. It's just that you need to be aware of them and know what's going on.
Absolutely. Murray, you coached for more than 2 decades.
Yeah, about 23 years, 24 years.
That's amazing. Yeah. Amazing. When you think back to your early years of coaching and some of the changes that may have occurred, and of course this was all soccer. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
Of course, as you said, you helped to institute the women's program in soccer at Francis Marion, and you arrived at Francis Marion, you said, in '94?
Correct, August of '94.
So the first 10 years of coaching, you were out in the Midwest? Or?
Yeah, I coached at Hiram College, a Division III school.
In Ohio?
In Ohio, southeast of Cleveland. So a Division III school, the small private school, and similar situation where the programs were in terms of success and to where we built them to.
Right.
So, but what's happened over the years, it's just like text messaging. Who would have looked at text messaging, when I started coaching? You wouldn't have thought about that. You look at the use of, when I first started coaching, the use of email wasn't there. So it's in any profession that, I tell our coaches all the time, you need to constantly be changing, constantly staying up to date with not just technology, but the job changes.
Right.
And if you're not willing to stay up with the changes in the job, you need to make a decision as a person. If you don't like it, then you need to get out of the profession. And there's different requirements, and to be a successful recruiter, to communicate. I don't think there's anybody in today's society that don't realize that coaches has changed and that you've had to adapt to student athletes, and that the way you might went about coaching a student athlete 30, 40 years ago is different than today.
That's a great point.
So, when I think you look at very successful coaches like somebody like Dean Smith, and you look at him, and you look at the changes, they have had to adapt to changes throughout the years and have done that. And that's what successful coaches do. They're able to adapt to the landmark. They still have a philosophy and a core set of values that they stick with.
Right.
And they're able to articulate those and not go past an ethical boundary, but they're also able to adapt to the surroundings around them as recruiting changes, as academic requirements change, as the institution changes, those type of things.
How about some of your heroes in coaching, Murray, over your as you were getting into the profession back in '84 as a full-time basis? And the reason I ask that, trying to think about if some of those heroes are still coaching, and if they have adapted well to the change. You mentioned Dean Smith, a superstar there, and of course his ability, having retired a decade ago, let's say, his ability to potentially keep up with kids. I mean, Coach K's done an amazing job, obviously, but he has a tremendous assistant coaches around who kind of keep him young.
Absolutely.
What about for you, some of those early heroes 25 years ago, 23 years ago, and are any of them still coaching, and do you think they've adapted well to the change?
Well, you look at it and you say there's some that adapted well and some that haven't adapted well from that standpoint. I hesitate to say this will come up with, with a grain of salt, but Bobby Knight, I don't want to say he's a hero, but I've always respected Bobby Knight in certain things.
Right.
Not necessarily his coaching technique, but even when you read Season on the Brink and you read books that are not very flattering about him, they all come across and they talk about the academics he had for his student athletes, the ethical behavior he had, and you knew where you stood with him. So I think that's an important characteristic when you look at Dean Smith, with Coach K, when you look at those type of people, you see people that they definitely stand for something. From that, one of the most famous quotes I'll ever remember about Bobby Knight is I think people remember the NBA basketball player Shawn Kemp, and it's been well documented several times that Kemp came down to visit Indiana, and he was sitting and Bobby Knight threw Steve Alford out of practice for what I can't remember, whatever the reason, and he walked over and sat down with Shawn Kemp and just said, I threw the best player in America out of practice. What do you think's going to happen when you come? And that's a fairly unique recruiting scenario, but I think, basically, he was very straightforward in telling the student athlete,
right.
This is what you're going to get. This is what
right.
you're going to expect,
right.
and those are things that I really respect, and when I look at coaches, when I look at people, is there's an integrity about what they do.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily going to agree with everything they do,
right.
but they have a certain integrity, they have a certain belief and a value system that they follow. So,
right.
I want to be careful. A lot of people you love or hate Bobby Knight.
Sure.
From that, and so there's different things, but there's certain things that I think he stood for. But I think that's true when you look at Dean Smith, when you look
right.
at a lot of those type of coaches.
Yeah, alphabet starts with an A and ends with a Z. You've been rearranging that, and rightfully so, student athlete,
Mm-hmm.
S then A. I mean, the key word there, student ahead of athlete. That's probably difficult for some coaches, as opposed to, say, athlete student. I mean, it's probably difficult for some coaches. You really want to have that opportunity to keep them on the field more, to keep them practicing. We think about weather like this. Think if you had a football squad.
Mm-hmm.
It would be difficult to think about getting these guys out. I know we've been reading about Coastal Carolina getting them out late in the afternoon, so they're just totally not worn out.
Taking care of the welfare,
Right.
Our men's soccer, women's soccer are practicing outside right now, and the heat's obviously a very concern, and and making adjustments to practicing early in the morning to practicing late in the night, to deciding, it's difficult for a coach. They're saying, I got X number of days to get prepared for my first game, and maybe because of the heat, I got to take an extra day off because of heat exhaustion.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tough situation for a coach. You're saying, boy, I just gave up a day when I needed it to get something done.
Right.
But for the health and welfare of the student athlete, that's what you need to do. And I think that's the difficulty in college athletics for coaches. There's pressure to win, to succeed for their job, and the good ones are able to keep that perspective in, and they're able to pull themselves back in. There's that ethical line that I keep talking about that they don't cross from that standpoint, and that goes from the academics, everything straight down the line. Academics, the health and welfare of your student athletes, and just taking an interest in them and what's going on. I think the beauty of college athletics and for college students is, they're able to not just participate at a high level, which is an honor, and get some value of that, but they also are able to not just develop relationships, but they have a safety net for them. They have a mentor there for them, and not the coach, but also the other student athletes, the seniors, and and what you really see in really good programs, and again, you go to North Carolina basketball. I know I've read about Dean Smith doing this. That his seniors on the squad, they had duties of carrying the equipment out to the airplane or the bus, not the rookies,
not the freshmen,
the freshmen, not the rookies, but the seniors.
Right.
And again, that type of leadership, and again,
sounds
attention
like
to detail,
Right.
attention to detail. The good coaches, the good people pay a lot of attention to the detail.
Right.
It may not make a huge thing about certain things, but at the same time, there's no detail that goes unnoticed or unturned, or that they haven't considered how that impacts their program.
Sure.